Story 1. This is a topic I really enjoy covering: unsettling new house stories. People move into their homes only to discover something, or maybe someone, that shouldn't be there. This incident happened years ago, but thinking about it still unsettles me. I'm only sharing it now because enough time has passed, and I feel safe putting it online. Back then, my wife and I had just relocated to the suburbs from the city. We'd had our third child, and our apartment felt incredibly cramped with baby gear, toys, and chaos. We found a nice house in a quiet, safe area. Neighbors described it as the kind of place where leaving doors unlocked felt fine. The house wasn't huge, but it was definitely bigger than our previous tiny space. My wife particularly loved the backyard with its beautiful, slightly overgrown garden featuring a few old, weathered statues. They looked a little eerie, like something from Game of Thrones. Weirdly, my wife and I loved them, saying they gave the yard character. I was indifferent, so I left everything as is, statues included. Less work for me was never a complaint. A few days after moving in, I was looking out the window at the yard when I noticed something odd. One statue, an angel, I think, was facing away from the house, or the others faced towards us, making it look strange. I could have sworn they all faced the same way, but I wasn't sure. I dismissed it, thinking I misremembered. The next morning, I looked again and saw another statue had turned around, also facing away. This time, I knew something was wrong. I was absolutely certain. I asked my wife, but she shrugged it off, saying she hadn't noticed. I wondered if it was my son Jimmy, a little prankster always up to something, but he looked at me like I was crazy when I asked. I doubted he'd do that anyway. I knew something was happening but couldn't prove it. I tried ignoring it, having bigger worries like tight finances and constant fear of losing my job. A few quiet days passed, and I started relaxing. Then, one evening, I looked out the window and my heart nearly stopped. All the statues were lined up in a row right at the edge of the yard, just standing there. It was a freakish sight, straight out of a horror movie. Ridiculous as it sounds, I could feel all those eyes on me. My breathing went shallow. I couldn't decide if it was more scary or bizarre. I went outside for a closer look. Before opening the door, I nervously glanced around the daylight yard, feeling paranoid. I finally worked up the courage. I tried to lift one statue and immediately realized they were incredibly heavy, far too heavy for one person to move. I couldn't budge it. As I stood there, my wife came out, her face showing she was just as freaked out. She suggested neighbors might be messing with us, scaring the new people. That made little sense. The neighbors seemed normal, and harassing a family with young kids wasn't a harmless prank. We called the police, but they couldn't do much. They suggested security cameras, but we couldn't afford them. I told them we would, but inside, I was reluctant. They left, and I felt slightly better, though my wife was extremely shaken. We hid the situation from our kids, not wanting to scare them. Nothing happened the next day or the next. I thought maybe the cops scared the person away. We tried to forget, though neither of us felt comfortable. Telling myself it was just a prank didn't calm my nerves. I was on edge, checking the windows constantly, dreading seeing a statue moved. I hope no one ever feels unsafe in their own home. After a few more incident-free days, I thought the nightmare was over. The house finally felt like home. I could not have been more wrong. It was a weekend. My kids were home. After breakfast, I went outside to play with them and saw it. "Go away" spray painted in big black letters on our back wall. I nearly dropped my son. I rushed the kids inside and told my wife to stay with them. Adrenaline took over. I'm not brave, but I sprinted through the garden, screaming threats. No one was there. As I walked back, the adrenaline turned to fear. This was serious, a direct, scary message. They could have meant harm, and I knew it would escalate. The police came again, but had no leads. They said it might be delinquents and promised patrols nearby, a small consolation. My wife was twice as upset. I reassured her, though I was freaking out inside. That night, I was in the kitchen when my wife screamed from the living room. I ran in. She pointed outside. My stomach dropped. 5 people stood in our backyard wearing white face coverings, dancing in a strange, jerky way like puppets. We watched frozen. It was terrifying. I don't know what they wanted, but it was the most disturbing thing I'd seen. I snapped out of it, grabbed the biggest kitchen knife, screamed at my wife to call the police, and ran out the back door. I screamed insanely and took one step before instantly regretting it. 5 against 1. They could be armed. I turned and ran back inside like a coward. The knife must have scared them. They stopped dancing and ran into the garden. I told my wife to hide with the kids upstairs while I guarded the back door. By the time police arrived, they were gone. A search found no trace. That was the last straw. I bought and installed security cameras the next day. Finances be damned. My wife begged to move for weeks. I promised we would if one more thing happened. Luckily, the cameras worked. Those people never returned, and we had no more incidents. The scariest part is we still live there, never knowing what happened. Story 2. My wife Taylor and I recently moved from our old home. She wanted distance from her family, so that's what we did. We don't have kids, and she stopped working a while ago, so she was open to my suggestions on where to move. Being an electrician, moving isn't a big problem for me. We settled on New Mexico. We've always been rural people, so it wasn't a drastic change. That was about 3 months ago. We found a fantastic deal on a place way out in the country. The house is honestly bigger than we need for just us and our black lab, Lola. We figured we'd use the extra space, maybe host future friends. We'd been settled a few months when I noticed something odd. The upstairs lights kept tripping circuits, while the rest of the house had power. After it happened twice, I knew the problem. Being an electrician, this is my expertise. I thought it would be an easy fix, likely just rearranging some load on the breaker, probably downstairs. Times like that make me glad I can fix things. Honestly, I hadn't spent much time in the basement since moving in. We glanced at it with the realtor, but I hadn't paid attention. I don't think I'd been down there once since. I walked down the stairs to find the main breaker. The basement was cluttered, unusable, more like storage. I found the main, figured out the load imbalance, and decided to rewire it later. Curiosity got me. Since I was down there, I looked around. It was filled with old furniture and junk. Nothing interesting. Making it usable seemed like too much hassle. Then I noticed something odd in the far corner. A large metal door behind a stack of old chairs. It wasn't normal. It looked industrial, taller and thicker than standard doors. I walked over. It resembled a walk-in safe or panic room door. My first thought was a tornado shelter, but the realtor never mentioned it. I tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. It was locked. I went upstairs and rummaged through the drawer of keys the previous owner left. None of the 15 or so keys worked. I told Taylor. She was just as curious. Somehow, she got us in contact with the previous owners. The call shifted me from curious to downright concerned. They were odd on the phone, pausing often like they were careful not to say too much. I wish I'd recorded it. When I asked about the door, they got quiet. The wife eventually said it was a safe room for tornadoes. I said that was great, but it was locked. After another pause, she claimed they'd lost the key and told us to ignore it. That seemed extremely unlikely, given they'd left keys for random doors. Her tone gave me a bad gut feeling, but there was nothing I could do. We hung up quickly. They weren't chatty. Taylor laughed it off, saying I was overthinking, but I couldn't let it go. Over the next weeks, I'd go downstairs and stare at that door, wondering what was inside. I tried tricks from work, but the lock was solid. I gave up for a week, but curiosity won. Fast forward to 2 days ago. After my wife's urging, I hired a locksmith. He worked downstairs. I checked after 30 minutes. He said the lock was unusually complex for a simple panic room. I worried he couldn't open it, but surprisingly, he cracked it after another half hour. I wish he hadn't. Inside was set up like a shrine. Old black and white photos covered the walls, marked with strange symbols. A chair sat in the center, facing the wall like someone spent time staring. A cot with crumpled blankets was in one corner. It smelled stale and gross. Then I saw the trash, empty chip bags, crumpled water bottles. It hit me. Someone had been living down there, and recently. I was dumbfounded. I thought it couldn't get worse, but of course it did. As I took it in, I noticed a second small door on the far right. Half hidden, I opened it. Stairs led to the cellar door outside. I felt like an idiot. I'd never checked that door, assuming it led to the basement. In all our time there, I'd never opened it. My bewilderment turned to terror. Someone had been living in my house, possibly for months. Things clicked. Weird things had gone missing since we moved in. I'd blamed my wife's tendency to misplace things. This changed everything. I repeated it in my head. Someone lived here. I didn't know who or why, but I didn't want them back. I tried calling the previous owners, demanding an explanation, even threatening legal action. They wouldn't pick up, number disconnected, or they ignored us. Taylor was freaked out. So was I that night. I barricaded the cellar door from the inside. With heavy furniture, I found a heavy-duty chain and padlocked it shut. No one was sneaking back in. Police came, took a report, said they'd try contacting the previous owners. We called our horrified realtor. She said she'd help police. That night, as we got ready for bed, a loud bang hit the front door. Lola barked frantically. We froze, staring at each other. After minutes, the banging stopped, but then small rocks tapped against our bedroom window. Taylor held Lola. I went to look, despite her begging. I was furious, ready to fight. I grabbed the baseball bat under the bed and yanked the curtains. I couldn't see anything. We thought it was over. Taylor wanted me to call police. Part of me wanted to handle it, catch them. I told her I'd call if one more thing happened. Then glass shattered downstairs. I sprinted down just in time to see two figures running from the house. The kitchen window was shattered. I called the police. They arrived, searched the house and basement, found no forced entry into the storm room and no one on the property. Their best guess, whoever lived there was angry about being locked out and came back to scare us. I was furious and horrified. Taylor has been a wreck since police escalated it as a crime and are working to track down the previous owners, which could take days. That was 2 days ago. We still haven't contacted them. I think police scared the squatters away. They haven't been back. I'm shocked this could happen. If we can't contact the previous owners soon, I have no idea what to do. I'm prepared to defend myself, but hope it doesn't come to that. Story 3. When I bought my first house at 27, I was proud. I'd saved for years. It was small, but mine. Moving in took adjustment. I had lived with my parents, 3 siblings, and 2 dogs my whole life. That house was loud, always buzzing. This place was quiet, really quiet. That was the hardest part. Living alone felt strange. I wasn't sure I'd get used to it. Anyone moving from family to alone understands. One thing I loved was the tiny second-floor balcony. Don't get the wrong idea. It was barely big enough to stand on, no room for a chair. Still, I went out most nights after work to clear my head. I smoked often but hated the smell inside, so the balcony was perfect. I didn't even need to go outside. Let me describe the layout. The block was standard, houses adjacent down the street. Behind mine was the same, meaning backyards would connect without the 10-feet-tall fences marking property lines. From my balcony, I could see over my backyard neighbor's fence into his whole yard. After a few weeks, I realized I'd met all neighbors except him. Come to think of it, I'd never even seen him. He never waved, never came over. I never saw him in the yard or at the window. Nothing. It was like he didn't exist. Only an occasional bedroom light at night suggested otherwise. I guessed an old person lived there. The grass looked uncut for years, and I never heard sounds from their yard. Curiosity got me. I decided to introduce myself. One Saturday, I walked round the block to his place. The house looked rough, an understatement. It looked untouched. The yard was overgrown with weeds. Paint was chipping, siding scratched, walkway stained. The doorbell was broken, so I knocked loudly. Nothing. I felt awkward, wondering if it was vacant. Then I saw slight movement behind a window shade, a flicker, like someone peeking. That was enough. Someone was spying but wouldn't open the door. I turned to leave when suddenly the door flew open, slamming against the wall violently. I jumped back, startled. I whipped around to face a short elderly Asian woman in the doorway, staring. She had gray hair in a tight bun, wrinkled skin, but tense like flexing muscles. Her eyes were unsettlingly wide. Honestly, I was freaked out. Something was off, like she was on something. She didn't speak, just stared expressionless. I cleared my throat and introduced myself as her new neighbor. After a few seconds, she said her name was Priscilla and gave a half smile. That was it. She didn't ask my name, she just stood there watching. I nodded and left, unnerved. I never heard the door close, but didn't look back. That night, I went to my balcony as usual. Glancing over the railing, there she was, the lady, from earlier standing dead center in her yard, staring straight up at my house. She didn't move or call out, just stood there. It was surreal. I questioned if I was really seeing it. I didn't know if to speak, wave, or pretend not to see. It was freaky. I went inside, telling myself she was just messed up, harmless. But it didn't stop. The next night I saw her again, moving from window to window inside her house, watching me from each. I pretended not to notice, but felt she knew I knew. I hoped she'd stop. She was still watching when I finished and went inside. Curious, I peeked out 20 minutes later. Horrifyingly, she still was. I called my dad. He thought she probably had dementia, was lonely or confused. He said I should feel bad for her. It was hard to feel bad for a stalker, but he calmed me, assuring me she was harmless. A few nights passed quietly. I didn't see her. I thought maybe Dad was right. Glad I hadn't overreacted. That is, until one morning I found a woman's sock on my side of the fence, just sitting in my yard. A chill ran through me. This wasn't just strange behavior. She'd been on my property. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to confront her, but felt I couldn't ignore it. I should have called police then, but didn't, wanting to avoid neighbor issues. That night, lying in bed, the doorbell rang, not once or twice, but at least a dozen times. I knew it was her, tired and more annoyed than scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. I got up, threw on a shirt, and went to the door, telling myself I'd just ask her to leave me alone. I felt I'd put it off long enough. Looking back, I cringe at how flippantly I handled it. Naive is the best word. The second I opened the door, she lunged at me with a kitchen knife, screaming full speed, her face twisted in rage. She yelled about me taking her son. I barely processed it. I grabbed her arm, wrestled the knife away, and pinned her to the floor. She was easy to overpower, but it was terrifying. My heart raced, hands shook as I held her and called police. She kept screaming nonsense about her son, threatening to kill me. She tried to bite me once. I held on until police arrived. The longest 5 minutes of my life. She never stopped screaming or squirming. Police restrained her, forced her into a cruiser. She screamed even inside the car. I'd never been more scared. Police checked on me, said she'd be sent to a psychiatric facility. I never saw her again. This incident weighs heavily on me, making me more paranoid and cautious. I moved out less than a year later.